Okay, tonight we're starting a 5-week series. It could be much longer. You'll see as we go through it tonight.
Is that a threat?
It's a threat. If you don't get it in the first 5 weeks, we're gonna keep coming back at it. No, you'll see what
Circling the desert.
No, you're gonna see that this is an expandable class that can be used at any time. It could be used as a fill-in. I mean, it's that kind of material. And so it can show up over 2 years here and there, 2 weeks here, so on and so forth. You'll see at the top of your page, some of you, a draft. That should have been taken out technically, but then again, this actually is a draft. So it's like, okay, this is a work in process. And this evening is a little bit like a planning session. So look at it that way. The theme, how to love, or learning how to live a life of love, the church theme. And we'll just go through this material. Begins with the keynote text, which is the golden rule, Matthew chapter 7 and verse 12. So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you. And it's called the golden rule, which is a measure of how useful people have generally found it to be. There are certain premises to the class that yes, love is felt and love happens, but it isn't just felt and it doesn't just happen. If it were only that, it'd be restricted to a very small circle of human relationships. In fact, love is learned. One of the reasons that in so many life circumstances we may fail to act in loving ways is that in those circumstances we don't quite know how to act in loving ways. And a lot of this is not really complicated. There's thousands of books on this subject. Many, I'm sure, are worth reading. I'm saying, in some ways, I think the pursuit of this through books would just put off the pursuit of it. You know what I mean? I mean, it isn't that complicated. It just requires consciousness and bearing down. And that's what our collective experiences over the next 5 weeks. Incidentally, I need a sub in 2 weeks, but so any of you who are eligible for that, have your ears open. You'll see, I think, almost, it wouldn't be a terrible amount of work. Okay, so this doesn't take reading vast amounts of material. Doing, speaking, and thinking in loving ways can be learned in community by folks drawing from their hearts and sharing from their life experiences. That's one of the premises of this class. It begins with communities, with gatherings that see this as an essential part of their reason for being. Now, if they don't know this is one of their reasons for being, it won't happen in those gatherings. But it can be done that way. Now, having said that, you don't have to read thousands of books. There is a further reading section at the end of these notes. And for most of you, all that will mean is just switching over your notes and seeing it. I'm just going to call your attention to the first book mentioned there, which is Brian McLaren's The Great Spiritual Migration, How the World's Largest Religion is Seeking a Better Way to Be Christian. And this to me is a fabulous book. And so the whole idea of how to love and learning how to love actually comes from this book. And I'm going to read to you the section in which I read it, and I said, oh, wow, that is the mission of the church. You know, had only been a minister at that point, 40 some years. And oh, that's the mission of the church. Great. You know, so Brian McLaren, if you don't know him, is really published minister, theologian, professor, pastor for many, many years. And at a certain point in his ministry, he left the pastorate and went into academia. And so this is, next two chapters is, the next two paragraphs is what I want to read. This is where it picks up. Shortly after I left the pastorate, my wife and I moved to a new town in a new state. We didn't know anyone there. For the first time in my life, nobody would know whether I went to church or played hooky. I was a little curious myself. Now, as a civilian, after over 20 years in the pastorate, would I still go to church out of a sense of duty? Would I stop going entirely? Or would I actually feel a need for church for the sake of my own soul? And to my surprise, I did indeed feel a need. But what I needed as a parishioner was very different from what had preoccupied me as a pastor. I wasn't looking for clever sermons or a certain style of music. I didn't need a church that was cool or contemporary or big or small. I certainly didn't need a church whose primary goal was to police the belief systems of its members. Instead, I wanted and needed a church that would help me live a life of love. And I went, how could we have missed this? You know, it's so simple, and McLaren just, to me, nails it at that point. And the reason despite saying you don't need to read a bunch of books, I pull that one out is because that's the book the whole concept comes from. And I need to acknowledge my indebtedness to McLaren. Okay, so where is learning to live a life of love learned in our society? If it really takes getting into it, takes learning, where is it learned in our society? Who is teaching it?
Seems like maybe kindergarten. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a reader of the New York Times, and I imagine several other people in this room and screen are as well. But I also imagine other papers have similar columns. And The Ethicist, I think, is a column in the New York Times, and people write in with tricky things, tricky situations. Should I do this or should I do that, or how do I handle the situation? And then so this person, from an ethical perspective, shares what he thinks is the relevant issues and the pros and cons of doing things, and how that might be the right thing to, he will point to what might be the right thing to do from an ethical perspective. And so I think that kind of column is popular. And then people write in response to, he might say something, and then there'll be people that will write in response to that. So I think that discussion is always interesting for people. I mean, that's, I think, one reason Dear Abby was so, that was my era, was Dear Abby, is important, because it asks questions that we tend to go like, that's a dilemma. What is the right thing to do?
And actually, a lot of that is how to love. I mean, The Ethicist, I've read it often, and it's actually very helpful for what we're talking about tonight. Others, where is it learned how to love?
Dale?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is odd. I was going to say the workplace. I think the workplace is a place of camaraderie. I think the workplace is a place of sharing, teamwork, getting together on a common cause. So, and helping each other. And so I feel that's a place.
Okay.
Or at least it should be a place.
It should be,
Yeah.
it should be a place. It also, I think, will turn out to be a place where often situations come up and we realize, hey, we don't quite know how to handle that. That we've never been trained in that particular situation. But when it's going, I mean, all of life is a place where learning to love happens. It really sort of comes down to effectively or not effectively. In some workplaces, it will be quite effective. I would love to work for Art and Julie.
Yeah.
That would be a place where you might learn this.
I think, Dale, my grandmother's kitchen was
Yeah.
a place where I learned it, and time with my dog. Dogs will teach you a lot about love.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, dogs will. And so there are places, and one of them is your family of origin. And I think probably as a society, we generally hope that it was learned and that it was learned there. Well, sometimes, and sometimes it was learned pretty dysfunctionally. I mean, the family of origin was not the place you really learned to love. And in all these cases, in the best of situations, you can learn to love in this situation, but the institution isn't particularly there for that purpose. It's just it's got good people, and from good people you learn to love. What these classes, these gatherings are about is, what if the church were a place? And what if Jesus were the way love is learned? Well, and again, like the workplace and so on, sometimes it is, you know, but, so what difference might it make in our world today if the church were a place? And what if Jesus were the way that love is learned? Now, the question I really want us to zero in on is, but what keeps churches from being places where we learn to live a life of love? When they fail, why?
Julie's got.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think I'm pretty confident that that is where I've learned to love, to live a life of love, is through Jesus and through the church. Now, you have to have loving leadership, or loving leadership is probably the best way of phrasing it, because there's loving people who demonstrate love. Now, if there are people who are not loving, then it can go bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes people who disagree with each other, they don't love one another the way they should. Even if someone disagrees with you, you don't stop loving them. But some people do stop loving.
Yeah, everyone hear that? Okay, let's checking the sound system here. That's a really good point. I mean, it's not that in churches there should be no disagreement, but there should be no unloving disagreement, which is a whole nother thing. The church has to have both disagreement and it has to have love. What I'm suggesting here is that for a long, long time in church history, learning to love was not the perceived mission of the church. It happened because there were good people in it. There were saints and other ordinary saints in ordinary life that are part of many, many churches. And so something was always learned, but the mission of the church was way too often something else. The preservation of the church, the propagation of the church, basically institutional issues, or getting your doctrine correct. That was absolutely fundamental. I mean, this has got to be a place where our doctrine and practice is correct. And that was given a whole lot more intentionality than the more basic thing of learning to live a life of love. It was kind of like, well, we have to get our doctrine right. It'd be really nice if we could do that in loving ways, but no particular attention was given to how that might be. Okay, so the next page, something I'm calling standards and measures, because I couldn't think of anything else.
James.
James,
No,
Right.
yeah,
I never seen so much love for me in this church. You know, with my problem, you know? I mean, everybody was reaching out, you know, touching me, you know, Eddie, you know, particularly, you know.
Yeah.
They've done, you know, 15, 20, but like I said, you know, Eddie. And everybody here, you
Yeah.
know, was touching me. And that encouraged me a lot, really a lot on the road.
That's a good testimony.
and you've shown a lot of love over the years,
Oh, yeah.
which made it a little easier. Okay. The standards and measures are really some text that we'll keep coming back to every week, sort of, as we begin again, looking at a particular challenge in a life situation that creates a challenge for learning to love. These are the kinds of verses that we can go back to. Two texts from Paul: let no debt remain outstanding except the continuing debt to love one another. For he who loves his fellow man has fulfilled the law. The commandments are summed up in this one rule: love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no harm to its neighbor, therefore love is fulfillment of the law. That's from Romans 13, 8-10, and in Galatians 5 and 6, which we looked at only a week or two ago. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Pretty strong, straightforward statement. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. Jesus, the night before he died, in John 13, 34 and 35, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Then the statement in the state, let's see. Everyone got a lesson plan? Okay. The statement in 1 Corinthians 13, if you asked where is the biblical teaching on love, that would probably be the text, because people remember it from weddings. That's not the context, incidentally, but that's where it shows up in our lives. Paul writes, love is patient, love is kind. Now, as I'm reading this, I want you to be thinking, what stands out in here? Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Anyone remember the next phrase? This is part of the work in progress.
Love never fails.
Love never fails. It's kind of in the next paragraph, and so I didn't catch that in the way. Except I'm looking at it when I'm prepping for class and saying, what's left out here? Love never fails. That's what's left out here. Now, anything stand out to you in that reading? I mean, it's great, right? I mean, it's very helpful, very practical, very a lot of common sense. Anything stand out? Something jumped at me when I read it this time.
I think the perseveres.
It's hard.
It means
It's hard to live up to
forever.
all of these. It's beautiful,
Yeah,
but as I said, I know I can't always live up to all of it.
yeah. Okay. Other comment? Yeah, Julie.
there's a lot of things it doesn't do, which is interesting, right? There's a lot of, doesn't do this.
Yes, that's what jumped out to me. It's largely stated in the negatives, what you do not do, which is very important. But it just kind of reminds you that even in learning how to love, a lot of it's going to be remembering not to do certain things. This you do not do if you're going to act in a loving way. The temptation you will have in relationships, no, do not do that. That's not part of this. Okay, moving on, a text in Philippians chapter 2, verse 4, part of chapter 2. Each of you should look not only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. It doesn't have the word love in it, but I think it's a fundamental principle of learning to live a life of love. You look not only to your own interest, but to the interest of others. Something I need to check again is I'm not sure that the word only is in the Greek. If you can pull that off now, that would be interesting. I wondered about that as I was flying through. Each of you should look not only to your own interest, or does it read, each of you should look not to your own interest, but also to the interest of others? I'm wondering if the Greek doesn't say each of you should look not to your own interests, but the interpreters looked at that and said, oh, that's a little hard. Let's put only in there. Okay, and then in the last, Kathy's going to have it.
It says not the things of themselves, each considering, but also the things of each of others, each other's. So it doesn't really have only.
Okay. Because it ups the struggle. When you have only in there, say, okay, well, I can pay really good attention to myself, but I need to remember some other people. And the text actually is a little more emphatic than that not to your own interests, but to the interest of others. And then Jesus back in the golden rule. So in everything do to others what you would have them do to you. Okay, a couple of questions that some of this raises. One of
Dale,
the
I think that Jane's got her hand up there, Dale.
Oh, Jane.
No,
No.
sorry,
No?
I don't.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe that's just on my screen. I don't. Oh, I'm sorry. It was my hand moving around here.
Thanks for that, John, but I'm with you, but I don't have a problem.
Okay. Go back to that text, Jesus the last night, a new commandment I give you. That's a great text. I'm not going to take the time to really bear down on it, but it's a great text to contemplatively consider Jesus' charge that evening before his crucifixion to those who would follow him, and look for the phrases or insights that stand out to you. So something to reflect on. Another question which I'm interested in responses to is, do you believe that love never fails? Let's look at the whole set of questions there. Do you believe that love never fails? In what ways is it true that love never fails? And what might we learn when love apparently has failed?
Well, God's love never fails.
Okay. It's good to go there because that one we're a little more confident of, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't say that, but I actually go there often. Yeah, God's love never
In our
fails.
lives. Yeah.
One way or the other, God's. But still, then that it apparently fails in some sense You see what I'm driving at? But then,
Uh-huh.
now, for instance, when John comes up with God's love never fails, I think of hell. I think of the traditional understanding of hell. And in fact, this is the text I go to, and I'm thinking God's love never fails, because I'm realizing that the traditional understanding of hell falls apart because God's love never fails. Doesn't mean there's no concept of justice, no concept of accountability. It just means that traditional understanding of millions and billions of people suffering excruciating pain forever and ever from a God whose love never fails does not hold together. There's some like major miss in that set of ideas. Elaine.
No, I'm just thinking, if you have a choice between love and hate, you choose love and it doesn't fail.
Yeah.
If you pose it against hate,
Yes. And so in that sense, when love is tried, it's always a good idea. In that sense, it never fails. You can count on it. This is going to work. Love never fails. So what might we learn when love apparently has failed?
Julie has the answer.
I was just gonna say that sometimes it depends on what your expectations of love are. If you expect love in return, chances are that may fail.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it wrong to do, and that's the kind of love God has. It really doesn't matter if you return it. He will continue it. So I think, that's part of what makes it feel like it fails, is when it's not returned.
Mhm.
Yeah, the whole issue of expectations, a whole lot of things start failing when you throw that one in there.
Yeah. But when I was thinking through it, the expectation, I think that some people come to and then things fall apart. It's like being a parent, where we probably all are familiar with situations where parents have had maybe a child that's been adopted, had been abused when they were very, very small. And no matter what that adoptive parent does in a loving, caring, and supportive way, this child is just broken. And in the love, it just doesn't fix it. And so they're just sometimes, and that's, I'm just using that as an example. I think there's other situations where people are so harmed by events in life that it seems
Yes.
apparently that no matter how much love is showered on this person, they just don't seem to be able to find healing.
And that may be one of those situations where you fall back on, but it was still the right thing to do.
Yes.
Love never fails. It was still the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the questions that I think maybe we have to do when in some situations when apparently it has failed is do some self-reflection, think through the situation a bit and say maybe that's one of the times where what we thought was loving wasn't really loving. There's a possibility that our love was either could have known more, could have thought through more, could have cared a little more. I've seen people who I'm pretty sure thought they were acting in loving ways, but they weren't. When that happens, yeah, you're going to have an apparent failure. So I mean, it's an interesting phrase. And the last one in terms of looking at these premises.
Well, I just want to say, I mean, we can fail at loving. I can fail at being
Yes.
loving, just like all those things in 1 Corinthians 13. We read them and we think, boy, there's really a lot of times I don't live up to all those things. You know, maybe I even get 80%, 85. I think that's pretty good, but I didn't make it all the way.
Yeah,
And the same thing with, love never fails. We don't talk about anything else in the abstract like that. Truth never fails. I mean, it's kind of weird to think of it as, except for God, we can't think of it in the abstract, because in
Yeah.
any instance, I might fail to be 100% loving. I
Yeah.
might have done it 80, 60, not at all.
Yeah.
But I could certainly fail at it.
but yeah, that's exactly the reflection I think it takes at that point. It's also why I phrase the question when it apparently fails. Go back and think it through. No, in my judgment, no big need for huge guilt here. Just what did we learn from this? Which increasingly is my approach to almost everything is well, that didn't quite go the way we wanted to go. And
I have learned to love going to church with people I do not like. And I suspect people have learned to love going to church with me, and they do not like me. I think that's a call to love. We won't necessarily be in the same circles. Our personalities don't necessarily connect. And I try to get away from the idea that I have to be the be all and end all to every person I come in contact with.
Absolutely.
Chris is going to connect with people that I don't connect with. Eddie's going to connect with people that I don't connect with. And I am thankful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Still in the area of premises, while we're looking at these texts as premises, going back to the golden rule. So in everything do to others what you would have them do to you. So I'm asking the question, is that the final word on learning how to live a life of love? Well, any question that's framed that way, you could suspect the answer is no. But can you think of some ways in which maybe it isn't?
Well, in framing it, Jesus frames it so that the standard of love is what we individually, personally define as love. It's what we want done to us, and automatically that's limiting love, because my understanding of love is going to be skewed quite a bit based on my own background, my race, my gender, my nationality, and a whole host of misconceptions and a lot of wrong thinking.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's just sort of the warning. I'm saying it's very useful. It's useful in the negative. Don't do to people things you don't want done to you. That you can generally sort of rely on, but not everyone's wired the same way, and so that's my reservation there. That there are things I would like. That's the way I would like it done to me, but that for other people, no, they don't want it done that way. They would like it done this way. So I think what you have to add to the golden rule is consciousness. Just listen, observe, get to know this person. How is it they want to be loved? What does love mean for them? This is a great rule, but just don't assume, because that would really cool for me that's the way another person will see it. Okay, so here's what this program of study over time will be, which is essentially case studies. And so I've listed in the next 2 pages situations and these were just situations I came to fast. Because life situations, they're infinite. But consider the following situations in which we might better learn how to live a life of love. And I'm going to read through them, but ask yourself which represent the greatest challenge to you, or leave you feeling the least comfortable as you think, ooh, or maybe bring out the worst in you. You already know when that one comes up, that's where you're going to struggle. Maybe take time to discern the degree of difficulty for you, or maybe which ones you might best benefit from discussing these days. And then at the end, there's some blank places right in other areas, other circumstances in which you struggle to learn how to act, speak, and even think in loving ways. And that's what I mean by this being sort of a planning session, this being a work in progress. I would like some help from some of you. I would like help from all of you, quite frankly. I would like to at least get some help from some of you on what are the areas that really strike you. You said that. I think I would love to see a group discussion on that, because I don't always feel like I do well in that situation. Right? I don't always think we do well in that situation. I don't think human beings do well in that situation. Let's talk about it. How do you agree? How do you disagree agreeably? I mean, that I think calls for like a huge group discussion. How do you disagree agreeably? Well, you quit disagreeing. No, that's not going to happen. How do you disagree agreeably? So let's read through these. And I have sheets here, incidentally, which is just these 2 pages from the printer just now. And if you'd like, you can use those to mark something up and get back to me. You don't have to, but just to make it easy and not have to tear your sheet apart. The printer's acting up, incidentally. But Sandy, the printer, I don't know, the toner, I don't know, something. You'll see when the sheet comes through, you'll see the issue. Okay, so running through some situations. There's things that came to my mind. When someone has made you really mad, that's a basic love challenge. Is someone has just done the wrong thing, and you just lit a fire. Someone's made you really mad. When you see a problem in someone's life that needs fixing, perhaps when you, in your considered reflection, left out a word here, perhaps when you, in your considered reflection, believe it represents real danger to themselves or others. And when I clean all this up, I will clean that one up. But when you see a problem in someone's life that needs fixing, perhaps when you, in your considered reflection, think, suppose, believe it represents real danger to themselves or others. Conversing with a stranger you're meeting for the first time. Chris's sermon last Sunday. When your child, imagine a teenager, or someone else you feel responsible for makes a mistake, how do you act in loving ways at that point? When humor gets out of control and is demeaning. There's been the odd time, even in our church family, when you're going through a potluck line and I'm going, I can't believe that person just said that, and so the whole issue of humor and doing it well. And then what do you do when it's been done really badly and you're present? What do you deal with that kind of situation? Learning to disagree agreeably, responding to those often discriminated against in our society, and relating to those who may be doing the discriminating, which that's one I'm sort of glad I caught on the way through. is, well, yeah, okay. How do we respond to those often discriminated against? How do we relate to those who are doing the discriminating? How do we do that in loving ways? When you're tired or busy or feeling impatient or inadequate, and someone unexpectedly requires or asks for your attention. When you're interrupted, how do you handle interruptions that you weren't counting on and that you find somewhat and maybe substantially inconvenient right now? Learning to live well in your neighborhood. How to relate helpfully to those you live near or with those you engage as part of a school or community association. Taking care of the sick, the hospitalized, or shut-ins, or chronically ill. Relating to those very different from you. When you disagree with a friend's politics or lifestyle. Life on social media. When you're surfing or engaging with others. When you feel betrayed by a friend. When someone has hurt your feelings, which may not be the same thing as being betrayed. Two different challenges. Living with those who are temperamentally very different from you, especially with the difficult people we all have in our lives. When you see someone you care about sliding into addiction. When in social encounters you feel insulted or slighted. There should be some space there, but when someone has given you an unexpected gift or compliment. Learning to love or mature in love for the one to whom you're married. I doubt that one's going to come up, frankly, because we don't have enough time. It certainly would not be a one night or one class kind of discussion, but it certainly is an area in which maturing in love is important. Acting on those expanded opportunities for loving others that become possible in a celibate life. We always talk about love in relationship as love in families, and I made sort of a commitment some years ago that I did not want to talk about marriage very long before I talked about celibacy. The single life, how is that lived lovingly? When you check marks all over the place. When you disagree with someone in church over a matter of interpreting scripture. When you feel a righteous anger, a real sense that someone is doing something wrong to you or others. When you're feeling social anxiety, maybe not knowing what to do next in a social setting. When you're making decisions about what to read or what to watch on TV or what music to listen to or what news channels to follow. Relating to someone you sense is feeling socially awkward or uncomfortable. When connecting cross-culturally to others, to people whose cultures are significantly different from yours. Reaching out in loving ways to those left out or left behind in our society. Trying to be useful and kind to those with specific needs, from the autistic to folks with dementia. Responding lovingly and or wisely to unloving people. When people wander from the ways of love, finding loving ways to bring them back. Discovering everyday rituals, prayers, or contemplative practices that best encourage you in the ways of love. That last one we could discuss at length, but basically just check any email that comes from Chris. That will answer that question for you. So if you online, please feel free to email me or catch me Sunday over time. It will help me to know if I see a bunch of check marks by a particular one. I will know in the next 3 weeks we need to get. I don't know what we're doing next week. A lot of it depends on what I hear. So it does matter what you're thinking, and I will be listening carefully for that. So in weeks ahead, anticipate classes in which we take up several of these situations or growth opportunities. And I phrase that carefully. Situations in which we often may feel awkward, situations in which we may often feel we fail. We're not very good at them. Well, yeah, that's how I might have looked at it in years past, but really what they are is growth opportunities. Situations we can make a whole lot more of than we could before. There are very creative, constructive, loving ways to handle the situation in which we all move forward. And so I'll often be thinking of these as growth opportunities. So just a model tonight, we have a few minutes left over, but I'm just taking the first one in the list. When someone has made you really mad. How I anticipate this going forward is mainly it turning into discussion, a conversation. But in each case, it will begin with certain questions we're expecting, that I hope get the conversation going. So in light of our standards and measures, that means in light of the particular scriptures we listed a couple of pages back, there could be other verses for sure. Let's explore together ways you might act, speak, and think in ever more loving ways when someone has made you really mad. Okay. How is this situation often depicted in movies, TV shows, or books? With what consequences? In other words, how does our culture deal with this? How does our culture expect this to go? So how have we seen someone makes me really mad, makes someone really mad? In a movie, what happens? In a TV show, what happens? When you're reading a book, what likely happens? And with what consequences? Can you recall stories from the life of Jesus or other texts in scripture that perhaps show you loving ways forward when someone has made you really mad? Let me run through the list and then we'll now think through, and if you will, share experiences when this happened to you, or when you experience this happening to someone else. What insights might you offer, and what lessons have you learned? Now, but basically, it's these middle three questions that I think frame the conversation. And then the last one is, now based on this time together, what lessons might you keep most in mind for facing this challenge or growth opportunity in the future? That's kind of like notes you will sort of be writing at the end to what am I going to remember from this? So what I'm saying is, you could take any of these case studies here, and if you said, disagreeing with someone in church over a matter of interpreting scripture, the first sentence would be, in light of our standards and measures, let's explore together ways you might act, speak, and think in ever more loving ways when you disagree with someone in church over matters of interpreting scripture. Or can you recall stories from the life of Jesus or other texts in scripture that perhaps show you loving ways forward when you're disagreeing with someone in church over how scriptures in other words, that's a fill in the blank kind of thing. James?
We could spend weeks on each one of these.
Yeah.
You think?
Yeah, I think we, should take a considerable amount of time, each one, maybe, instead of skimming over one.
Oh, okay. Well, this tonight's just showing you where we're going.
Oh,
So absolutely. No, pacing is going to be a challenge. I mean, I would probably come into a class each evening with a couple lined up in my mind. But I also there will be ones where you're rushing it if you just spend one night on it. That's what James is saying, I think, and he's right.
one sentence.
Yes. But so pacing is going to be, the only thing I'm going to say there is some of them you could spend months on and you would never get to another one. And we're all, these are all challenges. So I think maybe what we might notice is we get to an end of an hour on one and we say, boy, that was a big one. And we did not really wrap it up. That one, well, we have some sermons coming. We have, some other ways, but that's a major issue. Obviously, we couldn't get it done in a week.
Well, I would also suggest that some things we can talk about, and then the next thing is you have to go out and practice it, and then come back and talk about it some more. So it's thinking of it, thinking about how scripture applies to it, how we apply scripture to it, and then going out and trying to act on it, and then perhaps you maybe have discussions, maybe one-on-one with other people in this class about how you're doing with that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
There's one that sticks out at me, learning to disagree agreeably. And I think about the Wright brothers, and they would argue all the time, but they had such a way of listening to each other. By the end of the argument, they had switched positions.
Yeah.
The technique of hearing somebody's argument, and then you have to repeat back what their argument is, so that you show that you fully listen to what they said.
That's the kind of discussion that will go on here. And that last concept that Eddie said, which is, I think the best piece of advice I've heard on issues like that is at the end, you don't have to agree with me, but I have to know that you know what I said. And that test exactly.
Well, Dale, I always appreciate when Eddie and I have these moments that he always knows that I'm right.
You're all
That's not really
So much easier.
okay, Robert,
you're muted.
you're muted, maybe.
Yeah, I was muted. Thank you. In terms of, somebody you're mad with, or a lot of things that you said in that long list of things that you gave previously, I just keep thinking of the Sermon on the Mount, and Jesus telling you love your enemies.
Yeah. Well, I figure the Sermon on the Mount will show up a lot. Yeah.
Yes, it will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look it up.
If only someone here knew the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah. Speaking of which,
Right.
we have Laconia on Sunday, reenacting the Sermon on the Mount. So good point, Robert. Nice lead in, looking out for Laconia that way.
Julie had her hand up.
Julie.
I did, and I think, hopefully it's okay to say when we have 2 minutes, but one of the things I think will matter is the level of relationship you have in these circumstances. It may be different for someone you don't know well versus your spouse versus a very close friend. Some of these things are going to be answered differently based on the level of relationship.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we'll be tending to look at a theme, looking at a situation, but it'll be that kind of advice that will show up within that situation. It depends whether this relationship is pretty casual, but you care about it, or whether you're pretty intimate, and that's a whole other angle then. Okay, that's it for tonight, and I will love to hear from you. Oh, comment? Did I miss?
Just said good job, Dale. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you,
good night,
Dale.
everyone.
Sweet